for Friday, so that means we got to run this intro. With this guy. What's going on, Cap?
How you doing, John? I'm doing well.
All right, so you've got your friends, and they're training camping, and you're sitting here in your office on a Friday morning. Yeah, there's a smile on your face too, nodding your head. You're like, okay, yeah, y'all are in training camp, and I am not. Do you ever miss it? See, there you go.
The only part of training camp that I miss is like being together and like having that off time in between training sessions, or like a day off where you can kind of go out and do stuff off the field with some teammates and hang out, that type of thing. And like, hanging out in hotel rooms a little bit here and there. But that's about it.
When what are your, when you think of training camp, you mentioned the camaraderie and all those kinds of things. What was your first training camp like as a pro?
John, I could tell you some stories about training camps.
You want to write a book? We can write a book if you want.
So, a couple of funny stories from training camp back when I started in 2005 was much different than training camp nowadays. Right? It was a little bit different of a time period where preseasons were longer. You didn't show up 100% fit. Plus, I played for Stevie Nickel and Paul Mariner, who were like the ultimate players coaches. I mean, they wanted to have a good time above all else. And for example, it wasn't my first training camp, but I think it was my second or third year. We went to Cancun, and basically we showed up and they put a bracelet on our wrist, and they were like, well, here's where you can eat your meals. And, we're going to have training at 10 o'clock every morning. Make sure you're on the bus at 9:30. And otherwise, I don't care what you do. Or
wow.
It was unbelievable. We went to some crazy places. We went to Bermuda every year. I think they had some partnership with a travel agency. So it was incredible. We had some preseasons.
Yes, I bet you have had some preseasons. I mean, like I said, you want to write a book, we can write a book. We can do the documentary, do the behind the scenes. We can do the 30 for 30 if you want. When you talk to your mentees, when they're just starting their seasons, because high school season's starting here in Georgia and here in the South, I'm sure that's probably picking up steam all around the country. But when you have your mentees who are starting their own organizational elements, their seasons are starting, what conversations do you have with them about having hopefully maintained what you were hoping they were going to do in the off season and getting ready to take those first steps into their organized team activities? Do you break down what it's like to get things started all over again with your mentees and how to try to keep things in a straight line?
Yeah, a little bit. And it's so different now where the off season is so much shorter, even for the kids at a younger age. They've got some weeks maybe in between seasons and halfway points of seasons and stuff. So, I mostly say, hey, try and keep your fitness at a decent level, but take time off and enjoy yourself and relax and get away from the game, physically and mentally. Go do some other things to help keep yourself fit and enjoy being a kid. And then when it starts back up, I always say, don't be in a rush to get back to your top level. Right? You can't expect that, you go out there in day 1 or even day 5, day 10 and be at your ultimate best. Right. And because if the expectation is that you're going to be at your best, then, it can lead to some confidence issues and some, why aren't I there yet? Am I going to get back there? Like, why aren't I there yet? And so, you have to give yourself time, because it's not something that you can just turn off and turn on all the time, right? It takes a little bit of time to get back in the flow and get it into a rhythm. So those expectations are important.
Is there a generational difference when it comes to expectations? And what I mean by that is, we're on our driver's license, we're adults anyway. We may not act like adults, but I mean, when we are when we look back when we were kids, I think expectation levels might have been a little tempered. But now with the younger athletes, is pressure different? Is it more? I mean, when you look at today's younger athletes, how different is the pressure that they face versus what we face, do you think?
It's much different, much different. The expectations are much different. They're much higher. And the amount that they put into it, the amount that parents put into it for their kids, the finances, the year round. I was just thinking about it the other day, because my son was complaining that, he was bored and like couldn't do anything, because I'm not allowing him on electronics for the day. And, just can't find anything to do, John, if he's not on an electronic. And I was thinking back to my time and I'm like, oh, God, there was a basketball hoop down the street and I would go shoot hoops for hours just by myself. And, I just loved shooting hoops, even though I wasn't that good at basketball, but I could shoot.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, and then it got me thinking I wasn't practicing soccer. And I loved baseball growing up. And so it was like, man, I went long periods without, really focusing hard on soccer. And this is, when I was between the ages of, 9 and 12 probably. And a lot of kids in that time frame today are so dedicated to one sport and 365. And so I think because of that, the expectations are a lot higher. And you see some kids out there today who are phenoms and they're 10, 11, 12 years old. And then everybody wants to be as good as them and thinks if they're not as good as them, then they can't get to the ultimate level. And I disagree wholeheartedly because a lot of those phenoms won't make it because they'll get sick and tired of it. They'll be burnt out. They won't have the love for it. And a lot of those kids that still have the love haven't developed yet for, physically or mentally or whatever, just haven't put it all together yet. But if that love's there and the desire's there and, that continues to grow as you get older instead of diminishing, then that gap can easily be jumped.
How hard is it to encourage today's athlete to go and do other things? It's like, yeah, dude, I know you're locked in. I know you love what you're doing with soccer. It's cool. It's okay. How hard of a convincing job is it to have them go out in the backyard and go, I'm about to date myself here, be Carlton Fisk in the 75 series, and do those kinds of things. How difficult is it to convince today's young athlete it's okay to be other things?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to convince the parents as well. And I think part of it is this like instant gratification that we've got in our society of like, we want to see and reap benefits right now. And the way to do that is to practice your sport, right? And get better at it. But they don't realize that, and this is kids and parents sometimes, that going out and doing other things may help in the long term with your sport, right? You're developing, and I think we've spoke about it before, of you develop certain attributes playing other sports that can help you, physically or mentally in your other sport, your main focus. Besides the fact of just getting away from the game is so important mentally. And physically, because doctors say now these kids specializing in sports from a young age, how these chronic injuries are going to become so much more prevalent because you're just using the same body parts over and over and over again with no break. So, it's difficult because they want to be the best right now and think that, well, if I'm not always the best, how am I going to make it pro? Because only that small little tiny percent make it, or that tiny percent get a college scholarship, right? So if I'm not consistently the top in every age group, then I won't get there. But I think that, as long as you have that desire and that love of the game and continue to grow, you can eventually get there and pass people that are currently above you.
What other, if you were to talk to the 15-year-old you, so basically if you were to catch up with yourself last week, if you were to talk to the 15-year-old you to tell you to do other sports that would help you with your soccer, what other activities and sports would you tell the younger self to do to where you could still be what you ended up being?
Yeah, and I will say, when I was 15, I was, I'm in high school, and I'm down at IMG Academy, so I'm only playing soccer now. I've stopped playing baseball, I've stopped playing basketball, so I'm only playing soccer as well, and not year round, but essentially pretty much. It's some time off in the summer, but pretty close to it. So 15 is an age where I think that you probably are starting to focus solely on one sport, but that doesn't mean that, even now, like professional athletes, professional soccer players, MLS guys, right, in the off season, they're playing basketball and playing hockey and doing other things and swimming, to keep their fitness up, because, you don't have to play soccer to keep your fitness up. So there's benefits to doing that, of like just mentally getting away from the game. So it's just, you sometimes you don't appreciate what you have until you don't have it. Right. And so it's like taking that time away from soccer sometimes can bring the love back, if your love is waning for it.
Abby brings up a couple of interesting points. And one, she's suggesting dance. Tap was great for her son. You had to work on shifting weight. Ballet was great for muscle flexibility. That's something I would have never thought of, but that's spot on.
Totally. I think that, for me, I've been huge on stretching my entire career, because I had Osgood Slaughters, which is that, like, that bump below the knee. It's like a growing pain. I had that pretty bad in middle school and high school, and I went to PT, and they stretched me so hard. And ever since then, I've always been super flexible. And I think it really helped me throughout my career. I mean, I think I had like one muscle injury where I actually missed time in 15 years. And I think a lot of that, some of it's luck, and taking care of myself, but some of it is absolutely because I stretched a lot. So I definitely think something like dance and ballet and things that you're stretching, and even yoga, is super helpful.
How much yoga stretching do you still do today, even though you're looking at everybody else at training camp? But how much stretching do you still do today?
I still do it, not nearly as much for sure, but my kids, again, won't stretch unless I stretch with them.
Okay.
They still don't see the benefit. So I stretch with them to force them to stretch. So a couple times a week.
Okay. Halftime with Michael Parkhurst, caps here for the Friday Free Kick, and our friends at Beyond Goals Mentoring. Abby brought up another interesting point, another thought here, and it's about the late bloomer. And it's really hard, she says, for when a player is a late bloomer, they feel behind others because they're slower to grow in height and muscle mass. How many late bloomers have you come across in your mentoring with you and Greg?
Yeah, a few, and that's difficult, right? There's always late bloomers, and even from my own personal perspective, I was, always a good player when I was young, but I was always also one of the quickest and fastest. And then I went through a period where I was not in the top half of the team in speed, and I just, everyone else was growing muscles faster and getting faster and quicker, and I just wasn't, and that frustrated me for sure. And I thought, man, I'm not going to be one of the fast ones anymore. Like, yeah, this is frustrating. But I will say that those players learn to play and to keep up by using certain skills that really, really benefit them once they start to mature, if they're able to stay with it and keep their confidence up and see the long game. And even with myself, like I wasn't ready to turn pro after high school, like some other players were. Like I needed time in high school, in college, to develop. I was small and needed time to play against other players. But again, that instant gratification is difficult, right? We want to be the best and don't understand that. And that's why we as a national team program have really struggled, to why is it that so many of our players that play on U15, U17 national teams don't end up playing for a full team or don't end up being really good pros and stuff like that, because a lot of those players are just the players that developed physically quickly, right? And they're faster and they're bigger and they're stronger, and so they're better. And then when everybody catches up to them, they realize, oh, my skills and what I've been relying on is no longer a strength because everybody else got there. But those players were relying on things like the mental side and their technical skills. But then when they grew, they had that whole package where the others didn't.
We mentioned instant gratification, we mentioned today's growing athlete, it's all of these things. It just seems to me that, we had pressure when you and I were in organized sports. Obviously, you were far more successful than I was, but it just, growing up and all that kind of stuff. When you look at today's athlete and what they want to do, high school and beyond, I would think that self-expectation is a lot harder on them. I would think that the pressure is a lot more on them coming from a bunch of different factors because you add in social media and all these kinds of things. How much more difficult do you think it is for the younger athlete today, even from the athletes of, say, 5 years ago, to try to accomplish what they want to accomplish? It just seems like there are all of these obstacles, more obstacles in their way than even 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny. You're right. There's a lot of obstacles. And at the same time, there's more than ever opportunities and ways to get better and improve, right? All the technology and all the things out there and nets and contraptions and this and that can help you work on your game, right? That we didn't have, and I think that the average player is so much better these days than the average player when we were growing up, because of that, and because the coaching's better, because there's more opportunities and more kids are playing. So it is more difficult for sure. And social media doesn't help, right? You see these kids that are 8, 9 years old that, are dribbling soccer balls and doing these tricks and all this and that. And, then you start thinking, well, geez, I can't do that. And they're younger than me. And, then that's getting to you. And it's like, funny thing, one thing I really did not like about going to summer camps, even as a pro, and talking to kids and stuff, because they'd always want me, oh, show me a trick, do something fun. And I'm like, guys, I can barely juggle. It was not something I worked on. And I am not proud of it because, I think that juggling is important. It really improves your touch and there's real benefits to it. But I never had the patience for it. I never enjoyed juggling. I just didn't juggle. I never did tricks. I got frustrated, and it doesn't really help you out on the field that much, I don't think.
I was going to say, it's kind of like taking algebra or European history in high school. It's like, what is algebra? What's trigonometry going to do for me as an adult, right?
Preach. Yeah.
It's like you're sitting there going juggling, and what does it mean for me as an athlete? And I'm sitting there going, man, I got C's and D's in trig and physics, and I had no business being in there. It wasn't going to help me do what I was going to do.
Yeah, exactly. And you just have to find what's right for you. Like, I could pass a ball against a wall outside my house for hours. And that was how I worked on my touch. It wasn't through juggling, because I found that fun, just passing the ball against the wall and receiving it and doing different things when I received it and stuff. And that's what helped my touch so much, not juggling. But anyways, it's just get back to the pressure of like seeing this stuff on social media and, comparing yourself to other kids out there. That's an obstacle that definitely makes it harder on this younger generation.
No doubt. And so when you were finding those things that helped you out, and there are questions in the queue about the men's national team. We'll get to that coming up here in just a little bit. But when you were finding those things that worked for you and helped you with your game, man, it makes me wish that there was such a thing like a soccer pitchback like we had in baseball, where you throw the ball and it just bounces right back to you. I wish we had a soccer version of that. How many times did you have to help repaint or replace planks from all of the work that you did from all of your passing drills?
I was fortunate. There was this, like, where my house was, and attached to the driveway, there was a little bit of cement. It was
Ah,
probably like a foot and a half of cement before the siding of the house started. So I probably damaged a bunch of the siding, when the ball accidentally got above the cement. But there was one window that was down into the basement, one of those like smaller windows next to the cement, and I definitely broke that a couple times. But that may have been more with the baseball, throwing it against it more than the soccer ball.
okay.
But yeah, there was definitely some damage, and I think some mental damage, especially to one of my aunts that was always over at the house because of the constant bang, bang, bang against the house. It drove her nuts.
Hey, dude, but the thing is that you're working on your craft, and that's what matters. And if your aunt is like, Michael, stop all that noise, it's like, but I'm working here, It's like we'll chill in a bit, When the sun goes down, then I'll come inside, and then you won't have the noise anymore. All right, so let's take technology out of it for a second. And this is just a question that I thought of here. I know that shocked you. If you were in the most rudimentary situation or environment possible, and you had a soccer ball with you, and you wanted to do something with the soccer ball just to kind of stay sharp. I mean, you could be out, this is like a summer camp thing. You could be in the woods, you can be in a backyard. What are some of the real simple things, if you take technology away from it all, that you can do to just help stay sharp in your game? Is there anything that you mentioned with the cement and all that kind of stuff. What other kinds of things do you think, if we pull technology away, just the basic stuff that can help in the day to day if technology is not with us?
Yeah, and I think just having a ball, and you don't even need anything other than the ball. And there's so many different little things that you can work on, right? Even for me, I didn't like juggling, but I did love punting the ball up in the air and bringing it down, like pretending, okay, there's a guy coming up on me on this side or that side. And what do I have to do with my first touch? And I have to take it away from this person. Or same thing, dribbling, just dribbling around in small areas and pretending and thinking in my head, okay, this guy's coming up on me, or I want to do this. And then, and just using my imagination of where defenders are and what I want to do with the ball. And then you're just dribbling around using different parts of your foot and turning and moving, and just all of that, being comfortable with the ball. And then when you get in those situations in a game, your body's a little bit more relaxed because you've kind of thought about it a little bit, and you're not as stressed when, a ball's up in the air and a defender's coming, or you're dribbling and someone comes on a certain side or whatever like that. Right. So yeah, if you have cones, dribbling in between cones and stuff like that, sure, it's great, but you don't have to have it. You can do that stuff without anything. Just out in a field or in your front yard or anything like that. There's so many different things.
Yep, and that was kind of what I wanted to get into. You mentioned imagination, and I think that we, of a certain age group, used our imagination probably more than those that are closer to this particular date because of all that technology that's around us. And I think that we get locked into technology a lot, when sometimes the answers or those aids can be just the simplest things, and we just come back to our imagination and think of things in 3 dimensions that way. I think that gets lost sometimes.
Totally. It's definitely a problem, a struggle with the younger generation. My kids, like I said earlier, they cannot use their imagination well. And I'm sure there's some kids that still can. Mine struggle. Like I said, if they don't have tech, or if I'm not playing with them, then they struggle of what to do. And so it's definitely something that this younger generation, because they haven't been forced as much as we were to use our imagination when they were home alone and doing things like that. So yeah, different generations.
All right, a couple of minutes left, and I know that folks have wanted to know your thoughts on the men's national team and the January camp, and we've got Atlanta United kicking things off in Chattanooga tomorrow. Jason Nix wants to know what your thoughts are on the Serbia match, the group they brought in, and the January camp in general. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought that the group they brought in was great. A lot of younger players, first-time players, a few veterans. That's what January camp is for, right? It's difficult to bring in a guy that doesn't have any caps into a meaningful big game, because like you saw against Serbia, a bunch of these guys were nervous. You could tell it was their first cap. They were nervous being out there, and that's a game that means nothing against a B-side Serbia team, right? In front of, like, I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 fans.
Yeah.
You know, if there was any environment to make your first cap when you're not going to be nervous, it would be that. But that just shows you how much of a big deal it is to represent your country and to get a cap, right? These players were nervous. You could see it. And so that's expected. Of course, you wish that the team played better. You know, I was happy for Julian and I was happy for Brandon because, you know, that was classic cross, great movement by Brandon and a great goal. So that I was really happy to see that. But in general, the rest of the performance, especially in the first half, was forgettable. But expected. It's good to get those guys that game because some of those guys will feature for the national team in the future, and they need games with that jersey on to, you know, feel comfortable so that when they get into an actual big game and need to have a good performance, that hopefully they'll be ready for it.
Yep. 7 debutantes starting 8 ended up getting their first caps by the time it was done. And I always talk about Glengarry Glen Ross when it comes to this kind of thing. Always be BC Cruton. Always be Cruton. And you got the dual nationals. You got Zendejas, you got Senora, and you got Brandon. And you're seeing the men's national team working their way. It's like, okay, hey, you know, you may not get the chance with El Tree, but you can get it here. And you're seeing this angle being worked to the success, to the addition of folks for the men's national team now too.
Yeah, totally. And that's a big part of it, right? Of the dual nationals, not only hopefully getting them into our program and buying them in, right? So they want to play for our country, but just the camaraderie within the group is important. And look, it's a difficult time for the national team right now, right? It's in chaos and flux over there, people leaving, and there's no leadership whatsoever on the men's side. You know, obviously they have an interim coach, but all the players know it's an interim coach. So it's not ideal situation. And so the players need to make the most of it though, because it's still the national team. It's still an opportunity, and whoever will be the coach was probably watching that game or will watch it at some point. So, yeah, it's an important thing for these players and for the development and for the national team, but you know, the result's not important. You just hope that the performance is a little bit better. But you know, the atmosphere is terrible. So, you know, it's January camp.
Exactly. And speaking of January camp, Atlanta United kicks off tomorrow, playing Chattanooga FC up at Finley Stadium, hoping to have a big crowd up there. It all starts anew again for Atlanta United tomorrow officially.
Nice. Yeah, it's exciting, you know, and the team's not set yet, right? It's not where it needs to be. And, you know, there's obviously rumblings of signings, and for sure there will be some. So, you know, it's a good opportunity to see, you know, where some guys are and, you know, start to get fit and whatnot. But yeah, I wouldn't expect too much. You know, it's early on in preseason, but, you know, if I don't know where Miles is on the recovery as far as playing time and stuff like that, but that's, for me, getting him and Brad out there in some game minutes here in preseason is the most important thing. And then hopefully, you know, getting the signings and creating a good locker room and a good vibe within the team.
All right. And what's the latest with Beyond Goals? What are you and Greg up to?
Yeah, like you said, high school season starting up. So we've been speaking with a few high schools. We speak again to I think Walton next week or the week after. So just making our rounds, trying to get to as many high schools as we can, and you know, try and set them up for success not only in this season but you know, down the road.
Raider Valley and BG Minner and Cap, as always, it's great to catch up with you and Greg. Great to have you guys here for the Friday Free Kick. Enjoy your weekend and pull folks away from technology. Just pull them away from technology a little bit. Enjoy what's going on. Have a good weekend, my friend.
You too, John.